And for the last question, we're going to call on the birthday boy and put him on the spot here. Father Joseph D. Orbegoza.
Mr. Aiken, thank you for all that you do. And I think my question from that I would find interesting, especially as someone who wants to be able to speak to the flock, can you tell us a little bit about what predestination is and isn't for a Catholic, especially because there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding and labeling of things like double predestination as this or that?
So you remember how I said that I'm often studying something within 48 hours of being asked about it? It so happens I'm doing a major study of predestination right now. So I'll keep it simple, though. One of the things that my own research has convinced me of is that there has been a major shift in terms of how terminology gets used in Scripture and in later theology. For example, the term elect today in theology, and this is not just in Catholic circles or Protestant circles, it's actually in both. The term elect, so if you're one of God's elect, what that means is you're going to be saved on the last day. Okay, that's how it's used now. You know how many times the word elect is used that way in Scripture? None. Instead, in Scripture, it has a variety of meanings, but when it's applied to individuals, it refers to having a special relationship with God. Just like, it doesn't mean you're going to be saved on the last day. Just like the people of Israel were God's chosen people, his elect people. Elect and chosen mean the same thing. The Israelites were God's chosen people. They were chosen to have a special relationship with him. And in the New Testament, that whole thought world gets transferred to Christians. So Jewish people are still God's elect people. Paul makes this point, for example, in Romans 11. But now Christians, including Gentiles, which I assume most of us are also God's elect people. But just like that didn't mean that Jewish individuals in the Old Testament are all universally going to make it to heaven, it doesn't mean that Christians are either. So the meaning of the term elect has shifted between its biblical usages and its theological usages. The same thing is true of other terms, including predestination. When you look at the term predestination in Scripture, it refers not to being predestined to final salvation, but to things in this life. In Romans 8, for example, which is kind of the key passage, Paul talks about how those who God foreknew, he predestined not to final salvation, but to be conformed to the image of his Son, which is something that happens in this life. We begin to be conformed to the image of God's Son, so our predestination is already being fulfilled. Now, in later theology, predestination did get used to refer to go into heaven or go into hell. When it comes to that usage, you can understand predestination as a Catholic. You can understand several possible models of predestination to heaven. What you cannot do is say God predestines people to go to hell. Double predestination, especially what's known as unconditional election, which is a term from Calvinist theology, is not consistent with the Catholic faith. God does not arbitrarily pick some people to go to heaven and some people to go to hell. As the Catechism says, the only way you go to hell, and there's even, speculation about is hell empty or not, but the only way you go to hell is if you commit a mortal sin and you persist in that mortal sin until you die. On the other hand, there's considerably more freedom about what you can say regarding predestination to go to heaven. Basically, though, the Catechism contains language that says God takes into account the foreseen free choices of individuals in his plan of predestination. And that would suggest that what God does is he sees who will respond to his message of love and grace. And those people, he says, okay, this person is going to go to heaven because they are responding Now he's outside of time, but they're responding in time to his message of love and grace, and so they end up being the ones who are predestined to go to heaven. And hopefully that's a ton of folks.